Imagine presenting your data findings to executive leadership, and instead of polite nods, they start asking how to reshape strategy based on your insights. That transformation from being tolerated to being essential doesn't happen by accident. In this video, I'm revealing the 7 rings of data leadership that will elevate your impact from creating reports to driving business outcomes. Whether you're an individual contributor or managing a team, these principles will fundamentally change how your organization values your work. The data leadership crisis. Did you know that over 85% of data initiatives fail to deliver any meaningful business value? That's right. Despite billions invested globally in data infrastructure, most organizations aren't seeing proportional returns. And surprisingly, this massive failure rate isn't primarily a technology problem. When I talk with executives across industries, I hear the same story repeatedly. Their organizations are drowning in data while simultaneously starving for insights that actually change business outcomes. One Fortune 500 CIO recently told me, "We've built this incredible data lake, but I can't point to a single decision that's fundamentally improved because of it." This paradox represents the essence of the data leadership crisis we're facing today. The gap between data collection and business impact continues to widen at an alarming rate. Organizations deploy sophisticated data warehouses, visualization tools, and analytics platforms, yet struggle to translate these capabilities into tangible results that executives can recognize. A recent survey of data professionals revealed that while 76% felt confident in their organization's data collection abilities, only 24% believed their company effectively used that data to drive strategic decisions. This disconnect happens because many organizations treat data as an end rather than a means to achieve business objectives. They celebrate technical milestones like completing a dashboard implementation or launching a new analytics platform, without rigorously measuring how these tools actually change decision-making processes. It's equivalent to celebrating the purchase of gym equipment without tracking whether anyone's health actually improves. I witnessed this firsthand at a major retailer where the data science team proudly showcased a customer segmentation model they'd spent 6 months developing. When asked how the model had changed marketing strategy or improved customer retention, the team responded with uncomfortable silence. The model was technically impressive, but disconnected from any mechanism to create business value. The fundamental issue underlying these failures is the confusion between data management and data leadership. While related, these are fundamentally different skill sets that serve different purposes. Data management focuses on collecting, storing, processing, and distributing data efficiently. It's concerned with data quality, governance, security, and infrastructure, all critically important technical foundations. Data leadership, by contrast, focuses on maximizing data's value through measurable business impact. It's about improving revenue, decreasing costs, or managing risks through strategic data utilization. Data leaders obsessively connect technical capabilities to specific business problems, ensuring every data initiative has a clear path to organizational value. A manufacturing client illustrated this distinction perfectly when they shifted their approach to predictive maintenance. Initially, their technical team built sophisticated models that predicted equipment failures with impressive accuracy, but maintenance schedules barely changed. When a new data leader took over, she reframed the entire initiative around business metrics, unplanned downtime reduction, maintenance cost savings, and extended equipment lifespans. This shift in focus transformed a technically successful but practically unused model into a system that delivered millions in annual savings. This transformation required a strategic mindset that's often missing in technically oriented data teams. Data leaders must understand both the technical possibilities of data and the business context in which that data creates value. They must be able to translate between these worlds, speaking both the language of algorithms and the language of business strategy with equal fluency. The most encouraging aspect of this crisis is that data leadership is not limited to executives or those with data in their job title. It's a skill set anyone working with data can develop regardless of their position in the organizational hierarchy. I've seen junior analysts transform their impact by adopting data leadership principles, focusing their technical work on questions that directly connect to strategic priorities rather than interesting but ultimately irrelevant problems. A data scientist at a financial services firm exemplified this approach when she noticed her team was producing dozens of reports that nobody acted upon. Rather than continuing this pattern, she interviewed key stakeholders about their most pressing business challenges and repositioned her analytics work to directly address those needs. Within 6 months, she had transformed her role from producing ignored reports to facilitating critical decisions that improved loan portfolio performance. What separates true data leaders from those who simply manage data is their unwavering focus on business outcomes rather than data outputs. They measure success not by the sophistication of their analyses or the elegance of their visualizations, but by the tangible changes those technical products enable in the organization. They ask not how accurate is our model, but how much better are our decisions because of this model. This outcome-oriented mindset represents a fundamental shift in how we approach data work. Instead of pushing data products to business stakeholders and hoping they find value, data leaders start by understanding key decisions and then design data solutions specifically to improve those decisions. This flips the traditional model on its head, making business value the starting point rather than a hoped-for outcome. Consider how a healthcare analytics team transformed their impact by adopting this approach. Rather than producing standard reports on patient readmission rates, they worked directly with clinical leaders to identify specific decision points where data could improve patient care pathways. By focusing their technical expertise on these high-value decisions, they helped reduce readmissions by 23%, creating meaningful clinical and financial outcomes rather than just interesting analyses. The 7 Rings Framework Overview. Transforming technical skills into business impact isn't magic, it's methodology. Despite what most training programs suggest, technical excellence alone rarely creates organizational value. There exists a set of 7 distinct capabilities that connect data expertise to business outcomes, and developing them simultaneously creates a multiplication effect that can dramatically accelerate your career trajectory. This healthcare success story illustrates what's possible with effective data leadership, but the question remains, how can you systematically develop these capabilities regardless of your current role? The 7 Rings of Data Leadership framework provides a comprehensive answer to this question, revealing why many technically brilliant professionals struggle to create business impact, while others with sometimes lesser technical skills become indispensable to their organizations. The framework was developed through interviews with over 200 successful data leaders across industries, identifying patterns in how they approach their work. What emerged wasn't a linear progression of skills, but rather a constellation of interconnected capabilities that truly effective data leaders cultivate simultaneously. Think of these rings not as sequential steps, but as concurrent areas of focus, each reinforcing and amplifying the others, like a musician practicing scales, harmony, rhythm, and expression together rather than in isolation. Data leaders who develop these capabilities in parallel create something greater than the sum of its parts. The first ring involves matching business needs to data capabilities, essentially ensuring you're solving problems that actually matter to the organization. While this might seem obvious, it's surprising how many brilliant analysts begin by focusing on what models they want to build rather than what decisions need improvement. The second ring focuses on proving and maximizing data impact. This means demonstrating in concrete, measurable terms how your work moves the needle on outcomes leadership cares about, whether that's revenue growth, cost reduction, or risk mitigation. Without this ring, even valuable work often goes unrecognized. The third ring addresses building high-performing data teams. This isn't just about technical prowess, but about assembling the right mix of business understanding, communication skills, and technical capabilities. Even as an individual contributor, you'll need to collaborate effectively with others who complement your skills. In the fourth ring, data leaders focus on driving model-driven decision-making throughout their organizations. This involves identifying key decision points where data can add value and ensuring insights are delivered in formats and timeframes that align with how decisions are actually made. The fifth ring centers on building trust in data. Without trust, even the most sophisticated analyses will be ignored in favor of intuition. This means establishing consistent definitions, transparent methodologies, and reliable data pipelines that stakeholders can depend on. The The sixth ring involves identifying and mitigating ethical risks associated with data usage. As capabilities grow more sophisticated, the potential for unintended consequences increases. Effective data leaders proactively address privacy, bias, transparency, and compliance considerations. The seventh ring, perhaps most crucial, focuses on influencing with clarity and purpose. This means communicating insights in ways that drive action rather than simply sharing information. Data leaders translate technical findings into business implications and recommendations tailored to their audience's needs and concerns. What makes this framework powerful is its applicability across roles and career stages. Whether you're a junior analyst or a chief data officer, these capabilities remain relevant, though how you apply them will evolve as your responsibilities grow. Consider the case of Marcus, a data scientist at a mid-size retail company. Despite having only 3 years of experience, he rapidly became one of the most influential voices in the organization by deliberately developing these capabilities in parallel. Rather than waiting to be assigned projects, he proactively sought to understand the company's most pressing challenges, declining customer retention in particular. Instead of immediately building complex models, Marcus spent time understanding how store managers were currently making decisions about customer engagement. He identified specific intervention points where better data could improve outcomes, then designed targeted analyses for those moments. By measuring improvements in retention rates and connecting them directly to revenue impact, he demonstrated the value of his work in terms executives cared about. When presenting his findings, Marcus customized his communication for different audiences, providing store managers with actionable insights they could immediately implement, while giving executives the strategic overview they needed for resource allocation decisions. He built trust by being transparent about data limitations and established clear metrics that everyone could align around. The result? Marcus was promoted twice in 18 months, eventually leading a team despite having less technical experience than some of his peers. His ability to connect data work to business outcomes made him indispensable. What's particularly powerful about the 7 Rings framework is how development in one area accelerates growth in others. As you build trust in data, Ring 5, you'll find it easier to influence decisions, Ring 7. As you better match business needs to data capabilities, Ring 1, you'll naturally improve your ability to prove impact, Ring 2. This virtuous cycle creates momentum that can transform not just your effectiveness, but your entire career trajectory. Data professionals who master these interconnected capabilities often find themselves advancing more rapidly than peers who focus exclusively on technical skills. They become trusted advisors rather than technical resources, shaping strategy rather than simply responding to requests. The framework also provides clarity about development priorities. Rather than trying to master every emerging technology, you can focus on capabilities that create disproportionate value. This targeted approach is particularly important in a field where technical tools evolve rapidly, but fundamental leadership principles remain relatively constant. Most importantly, the 7 Rings framework democratizes data leadership. You don't need to wait for a particular title or formal authority to begin developing and applying these capabilities. Whether you're analyzing data directly or leading large teams, these principles can help you maximize your impact immediately. Ring 1. Matching business needs to data capabilities. Now that we understand the framework as a whole, it's time to explore each ring in depth. The first ring, matching business needs to data capabilities, may seem obvious, yet it's where roughly 70% of data initiatives fail before they even begin. Think of this ring as the foundation that supports all your data work. Without it, you might build technically impressive solutions that sit unused because they don't address actual business problems. This happens with alarming frequency across industries. Consider what happened at a major retail chain that invested over $3 million in an advanced customer segmentation system. The data science team spent 6 months developing sophisticated clustering algorithms that created 12 distinct customer personas. The presentation to executives featured beautiful visualizations and statistically significant findings. Yet 3 months later, not a single marketing campaign had used these insights. Why? Because the marketing team's actual challenge wasn't identifying customer segments, it was determining which products to recommend to existing customers through their email program. The data science team had solved the wrong problem. They built what they thought was valuable, rather than what the business actually needed. Effective data leaders take a fundamentally different approach. They begin by understanding the business context before considering data solutions. This means spending time with stakeholders to uncover their actual challenges, constraints, and decision-making processes. When Sarah joined a manufacturing company as a data analyst, she resisted the urge to immediately dive into their vast dataset. Instead, she spent her first 2 weeks shadowing operations managers, asking questions about their most pressing challenges. She discovered that while executives worried about overall equipment efficiency, floor managers actually needed to predict which specific parts would fail in the next 48 hours to optimize maintenance schedules. This insight completely changed her approach. Rather than building a comprehensive efficiency dashboard that would have impressed her data peers, she created a simple but targeted predictive model for part failures. Within weeks, maintenance teams were actively using her solution because it addressed their specific decision-making needs. To implement this ring effectively, start by asking these critical questions. What business outcomes are we trying to improve? Is it increasing revenue, reducing costs, mitigating risks, or improving customer experience? The answer determines what success looks like, what specific decisions need to be made, who makes them, how frequently. Understanding the decision context helps shape the right solution. A weekly strategic decision requires different data support than a real-time operational one. How will success be measured? What's the current baseline performance? What improvement would be meaningful to the business? These questions establish clear expectations and help prioritize efforts. Only after you've thoroughly answered these questions should you consider what data capabilities are needed. Maybe the solution requires machine learning, or perhaps a simple dashboard would be more effective. Sometimes the answer isn't a model or visualization at all. It might be a change to a business process informed by a one-time analysis. A pharmaceutical company struggled with clinical trial recruitment, assuming they needed an advanced predictive algorithm to identify potential participants. After proper problem discovery, they realized their issue wasn't prediction accuracy, but rather the time lag between identification and outreach. The solution wasn't a better algorithm, but streamlining their communication process. A much simpler fix that delivered immediate value. This matching process requires developing business acumen alongside your technical skills. You need to understand industry-specific terminology, business models, competitive pressures, and regulatory constraints. This doesn't mean becoming a business expert overnight, but rather developing enough knowledge to effectively translate between business and data languages. Practicing this translation is crucial. When stakeholders say they want to improve customer satisfaction, data leaders dig deeper. What specific behaviors indicate satisfaction in our industry? How do we currently measure it? Which customer interactions most influence these metrics? This translation process turns vague business goals into specific measurable objectives that data can address. Jim, a data scientist at a software company, built this skill by volunteering for cross-functional projects and attending business review meetings, even when they weren't data-focused. He learned to describe technical concepts using business terminology and, equally important, to translate business problems into data requirements. Within a year, business leaders were seeking his input on strategy discussions, not just technical implementations. Implementing this first ring requires patience. It's tempting to jump straight to solution mode, especially when you are excited about applying new techniques. However, investing time upfront to ensure you're solving the right problem pays tremendous dividends. To practice this skill, try reversing your typical workflow. Instead of starting with the data and looking for patterns, start with business challenges and determine what data would help address them. When approaching a new project, commit to spending at least 30% of your time understanding the business context before opening a single data file. Develop a set of problem discovery questions you ask in every project. What would success look like for you? How would you use this information if you had it? What decisions would change based on these insights? Create a simple business problem canvas that documents business objectives, key decisions, current processes, and success metrics before any technical work begins. By mastering this first ring, you transform from someone who builds data solutions to someone who solves business problems using data. This subtle shift in approach dramatically increases the likelihood that your work will be used, valued, and have measurable impact. Ring 2, proving and maximizing data impact. Having impact and proving impact are two entirely different challenges. Even data teams that successfully solve business problems often fall into a dangerous trap. They track the wrong things. Instead of measuring business outcomes, they count reports created or models deployed, failing to demonstrate whether these activities actually improve revenue, reduce costs, or mitigate risks. This disconnection explains why data departments are frequently first on the chopping block during budget cuts. Consider this scenario from a recent enterprise software company. Their data science team spent 9 months building an advanced customer churn prediction system. The technical execution was flawless. The model achieved 87% accuracy in identifying at-risk accounts. Leadership celebrated the achievement in company meetings. Yet 6 months later, customer retention rates hadn't improved at all. Despite the technical success, the company couldn't demonstrate any actual business impact from their significant investment. What went wrong? The team never established a measurement framework connecting their model to business outcomes. They failed to track whether sales teams were actually using the predictions, whether the recommended interventions were effective, or whether the right customers were being targeted. When budget cuts came, guess which department was first to be downsized? True data leaders approach measurement differently. They establish clear baselines before implementing any solution. A healthcare analytics director I interviewed explained her approach. Before we build anything, we document how decisions are currently made and what outcomes look like today. For our readmission reduction project, we tracked not just prediction accuracy, but also whether interventions happened, their cost, and patient outcomes. This let us calculate an actual ROI that finance could verify independently. This measurement discipline transforms how organizations perceive data teams. When a retail analytics group documented $4.3 million in reduced inventory costs from their forecasting improvements, the CFO became their biggest advocate. During the next budget cycle, they received additional headcount while other departments faced cuts. Effective impact measurement requires establishing what I call causal chains, documented pathways connecting your data activities to business outcomes. A properly constructed causal chain answers 4 critical questions. First, what specific business metric will change if your solution works perfectly? Revenue per customer, production downtime, regulatory compliance rates. Second, what activities or decisions need to change to move that metric? Will salespeople need to prioritize different accounts? Will maintenance schedules be reorganized? Third, what outputs from your data work will trigger those changes? A daily prioritized list? Real-time alerts? A recommendation engine? Finally, how will you track whether those outputs actually lead to the intended actions and ultimately impact the target metric? Each link in this chain requires different measurement approaches. The weakest link determines your overall impact. As one digital retail director told me, we had a fantastic model predicting which products would stock out, but we discovered store managers weren't checking the alerts. The technical solution worked perfectly, but our impact was zero until we fixed the operational workflow. Impact measurement isn't just about proving value after the fact. It should guide where you invest resources in the first place. Top data leaders ruthlessly deprioritize areas where data demonstrably doesn't move the needle, regardless of how interesting the technical challenge might be. A manufacturing analytics leader shared her approach. We run small experiments before any major investment. We manually produced insights similar to what an automated system would generate for 2 weeks and tracked whether decisions actually changed. In one case, we discovered that even perfect predictions wouldn't matter because the process constraints wouldn't allow the operations team to act differently. We avoided a 6-figure investment in a system that would have had zero impact. This disciplined approach to measurement has another powerful benefit. It focuses data teams on actual value creation rather than activity completion. When teams see their work directly connected to business outcomes, motivation and engagement typically increase dramatically. To implement this approach in your organization, start with these practical steps. First, create a simple impact scorecard for each significant data initiative. Document the current baseline for the business metrics you intend to influence, how you'll measure changes, and what would constitute meaningful success in business terms. Second, implement halfway measurements to track whether your outputs are actually being used, are dashboards being accessed, are model predictions being reviewed, are recommendations being implemented. These operational metrics serve as early warning signs when your causal chain is breaking down. Third, schedule regular impact reviews where stakeholders verify the business value being created. These should include finance representatives who can independently validate your claimed impact. Fourth, embrace failure as a learning opportunity. When initiatives don't deliver expected impact, resist the urge to defend or justify. Instead, trace through your causal chain to identify where it broke down and apply those lessons to future work. One data science leader at a telecommunications company institutionalized this approach with what she called impact reflection sessions. Every quarter, her team reviewed all active projects, scoring each on a simple scale: documented business impact, potential impact, used but impact not yet measured, or no impact, not being used or not changing decisions. Projects with no demonstrated impact after 2 quarters were automatically discontinued unless leadership specifically intervened. This disciplined approach completely changed our relationship with the business, she explained. When we started, about 20% of our projects showed measurable impact. After 18 months of regular impact reviews, that number rose to over 70%. The review process forced us to confront reality and focus on what actually mattered. Ring 3. Building high-performing data teams. Measuring impact may transform how businesses perceive data teams, but who creates that impact in the first place? The answer lies not just in technical prowess, but in the composition, culture, and leadership of data teams themselves. While technical excellence provides the foundation, it's the transformation of specialists into business problem solvers that ultimately determines whether a data function becomes a strategic asset or remains an underutilized resource. The data team at financial services firm Blackstone provides an instructive example. When Matthew Katz joined as Chief Data Officer, he inherited a team of brilliant data scientists who primarily responded to ad hoc requests. Despite their technical capabilities, business stakeholders viewed them as a service desk rather than strategic partners. Katz realized the issue wasn't technical skill. It was the team's orientation toward business problems. I found extremely talented people who could build sophisticated models but struggled to articulate why those models mattered to our investment decisions, Katz explained. We needed to reorient the entire function around business outcomes rather than technical outputs. His approach reveals a pattern observed across high-performing data teams. Rather than focusing exclusively on technical depth, successful data leaders build multidimensional teams with complementary capabilities. They recognize that technical excellence alone rarely translates to organizational impact. Consider how Stephanie Williams, data science director at a major retailer, approaches hiring. Technical skills are table stakes, but insufficient on their own, she notes. I specifically screened for curiosity about the business, communication ability, and collaborative mindset. I'd rather have someone with moderate technical skills and outstanding business acumen than a technical genius who can't understand stakeholder needs. This perspective represents a fundamental shift from traditional hiring approaches in data fields. Instead of prioritizing candidates with the most impressive technical credentials, forward-thinking leaders seek individuals who demonstrate aptitude for business partnership. They recognize that Python proficiency can be taught more readily than business intuition or stakeholder management. The composition of high-performing teams also tends to be more diverse, not just demographically, but in skill sets and thinking styles. Research from MIT's Center for Collective Intelligence demonstrates that teams with greater cognitive diversity consistently outperform more homogeneous groups in complex problem solving. This diversity manifests in complementary capabilities. Some team members excel at technical implementation, others at stakeholder engagement, others at project management. Beyond team composition, effective data leaders create cultures that reinforce business impact through daily practices. Carlos Rivero, former Chief Data Officer for the Commonwealth of Virginia, implemented what he calls curiosity rituals, where team members regularly question assumed requirements. In our daily stand-ups, we have a practice where someone always asks, "Why does this matter?" about whatever we're working on, Rivero explains. It forces us to reconnect our technical work to business outcomes and prevents us from getting lost in interesting but ultimately irrelevant technical rabbit holes. This culture of curiosity extends to how teams interact with stakeholders. In high-performing organizations, data professionals are encouraged to ask probing questions rather than simply accepting requirements at face value. They're taught to recognize when a requested dashboard or model won't actually solve the underlying business problem and to propose alternative approaches. Accountability complements curiosity in these teams. Every project has clearly defined business outcomes, not just technical deliverables. Team members understand they are responsible not just for building solutions, but for ensuring those solutions create tangible value. Amanda Richardson, CEO of CoderPad and former Chief Data Officer at Hotel Tonight, implemented a practice where team members personally presented impact metrics to executives. When analysts know they'll be directly explaining how their work moved business metrics, their entire approach changes, she notes. They become much more invested in ensuring their work creates real impact. This accountability extends to how these teams handle failure. When projects don't deliver expected results, high-performing teams conduct thorough postmortems that focus on learning rather than blame. They recognize that failure is inevitable in innovation, but strive to make it productive by extracting insights that improve future work. Career development in these organizations also reflects the priority on business impact. While technical organizations often promote based on technical depth or management responsibility, impact-oriented teams create advancement paths that reward business value creation. They recognize and celebrate team members who successfully influence decision-making, not just those who build sophisticated models. We completely redesigned our career ladder, explains Jordan Morrow, Global Head of Data Literacy at QLake. Technical excellence is still required for advancement, but equally important are demonstrated business impact, stakeholder influence, and cross-functional collaboration skills. Cross-functional collaboration represents another hallmark of high-performing data teams. Rather than operating as isolated technical specialists, team members are embedded within business functions. They attend strategy sessions, participate in operational reviews, and build relationships across organizational boundaries. Alex Singletary, head of data science at Airbnb, rotates data scientists through brief assignments with various business functions. After spending 2 weeks embedded with the customer service team, our data scientists develop a visceral understanding of frontline challenges that forever changes how they approach analytics problems, he explains. This cross-functional integration helps data teams avoid the common trap of becoming technical silos. When isolated from business operations, even the most skilled data professionals struggle to create relevant solutions. Regular exposure to business contexts builds the intuition and relationships necessary for effective partnership. Leadership plays the crucial role in fostering these team characteristics. The most successful data leaders model the behaviors they seek to develop. They demonstrate business curiosity by deeply understanding organizational priorities. They showcase accountability by measuring their own impact. They participate in cross-functional initiatives that extend beyond data domains. Importantly, they also serve as translators between technical and business worlds, helping each side understand the other's perspective. This translation function proves essential in organizations where data literacy varies widely across departments. For aspiring data leaders, the implications are clear. Building high-performing teams requires looking beyond technical capabilities to the full spectrum of skills that enable business impact. This doesn't diminish the importance of technical excellence, but rather places it within a broader context of business problem solving. Ring 4. Driving a model-driven organization. While building the right team creates the foundation for data success, technical excellence becomes meaningless when models gather dust instead of driving decisions. You can develop the most advanced predictive algorithms with the most talented team, but what happens when no one actually incorporates those insights into their daily work? This is the essence of the fourth ring of data leadership, transforming an organization from one that has data capabilities to one that truly operates in a model-driven way. Consider the experience of Elena Chen, data science director at a global consumer products company. Her team spent 8 months building a sophisticated machine learning system to optimize marketing spend across channels. The model accurately predicted which audiences and platforms would yield the highest return on investment. Yet 6 months after deployment, marketing teams were still allocating budgets using the same spreadsheet-based approach they'd relied on for years. The model, technically excellent and potentially valuable, became what Elena now calls a model to nowhere. This scenario plays out across industries and organizations of all sizes. A McKinsey Global Institute report found that while 92% of companies are increasing their investment in data and AI technologies, only 8% successfully scale analytics to generate substantial business value. The gap isn't in creating models. It's in creating organizations that actually use them. Becoming model-driven requires far more than producing high-quality data outputs. It necessitates fundamental changes to how work happens and decisions are made. As Cassie Kozyrkov, chief decision scientist at Google, puts it, the problem isn't data quality or model sophistication. The problem is that we've focused on building data science capabilities without simultaneously evolving our decision-making processes. Effective data leaders approach this challenge systematically. First, they map decision journeys through the organization, identifying key moments where data can meaningfully improve outcomes. Rather than starting with available data or interesting analysis techniques, they begin with critical decisions that drive significant business impact. Take the approach used by David Kim, analytics lead at a commercial insurance provider. Instead of building an all-encompassing risk assessment platform, David's team shadowed underwriters for 2 weeks, identifying specific decision points in their workflow where data insights could most effectively reduce claims expenses. They discovered that underwriters made critical assessments during an early screening call but lacked real-time access to relevant historical performance data. By designing a focused solution for that specific decision moment, a simple algorithm that surfaced 3 key risk indicators during the call, they increased the accuracy of early screening decisions by 37%. This example highlights a critical insight about driving model-driven organizations. Solutions must fit seamlessly into existing workflows or be accompanied by thoughtfully redesigned processes. As Nathan Collett, Chief Analytics Officer at Nationwide Insurance, explains, models don't fail because of math problems. They fail because we don't correctly understand how decisions are actually made and where data fits into that process. Integration involves both technical and human considerations. On the technical side, insights must be delivered at the right time, in the right format, and through the right channel to be actionable. A dashboard that requires 5 clicks to access will rarely influence time-pressured operational decisions. A recommendation system that provides guidance after a decision has already been made adds no value. Josh Wills, former director of data engineering at Slack, uses what he calls the decision latency test when evaluating proposed data solutions. If the time it takes to access and interpret the data is longer than the time available to make the decision, your solution will never be used, no matter how accurate it is. Beyond technical integration, data leaders recognize that organizational incentives must align with data-informed decision-making. When performance metrics and reward systems conflict with what the data suggests, human nature typically prevails. For instance, a sales team compensated exclusively on deal closure rates has little motivation to use a model that identifies which prospects are likely to become long-term profitable customers versus one-time buyers. Samantha Torres, VP of Analytics at a financial services firm, discovered this disconnect when her team built a customer lifetime value model that rarely influenced how relationship managers allocated their time. The issue wasn't model quality, but misaligned incentives. Managers were evaluated on quarterly revenue targets, not long-term customer profitability. By working with HR to revise performance metrics and with the finance team to adjust commission structures, Torres created the conditions for the model to actually influence behavior. Successful data leaders also recognize that becoming model-driven requires building new capabilities throughout the organization. This includes ensuring that decision-makers understand how to interpret model outputs, recognize their limitations, and appropriately factor them into complex decisions. When Rachel Wong, Director of Decision Science at an e-commerce company, realized that merchandising managers didn't trust their price elasticity models, she instituted what she calls model literacy sessions. These weren't technical training, but rather focused discussions about how the models worked conceptually, what factors they considered, and where human judgment still added critical value. After these sessions, usage of the pricing recommendations increased by 64%, Wong notes, not because the models improved, but because the humans using them understood their proper role. The journey to becoming truly model-driven often requires creating feedback loops that demonstrate the value of data-informed decisions. Mark Johnson, analytics leader at a healthcare system, implemented what he calls decision retrospectives, where teams compare outcomes of decisions made with and without model inputs. These sessions aren't about proving the model right, explains Johnson. They're about learning together how to integrate algorithmic and human intelligence most effectively. But perhaps most importantly, driving a model-driven organization requires patience and persistence. Cultural change doesn't happen overnight. As Hilary Mason, founder of Fast Forward Labs, aptly puts it, organizational change moves at the speed of trust. This means data leaders must celebrate small wins, demonstrate consistent value, and recognize that transformation happens incrementally. The companies that successfully navigate this transition gain significant competitive advantage. Research by the MIT Sloan Management Review found organizations that effectively integrate analytics into their operations are twice as likely to have substantially higher revenue growth than their peers. The differentiator isn't having better models, it's having better processes for turning those models into changed behaviors and better decisions. Ring 5. Building trust in data. Creating processes that turn models into decisions solves only part of the challenge. Beyond implementation lies a more fundamental question of why decision makers frequently reject data insights despite requesting them. This trust deficit represents the fifth ring of data leadership and silently undermines even sophisticated data strategies. When executives say they want data-driven decisions, but consistently revert to gut instinct when presented with contradictory information, they're not necessarily rejecting analytics. They're signaling a fundamental lack of confidence in the information itself. A revealing study by Salesforce found that 57% of business leaders don't trust their organization's data despite having access to more information than ever before. This trust gap extends beyond executives. A PwC survey discovered that 62% of employees admit to regularly making decisions based on intuition rather than available data, citing concerns about data accuracy and reliability. Consider what happened at a major insurance company when actuaries presented findings that contradicted long-held underwriting assumptions. Despite rigorous statistical evidence showing certain policy types were significantly underpriced, senior executives rejected the analysis. The issue wasn't technical competence, it was that previous analytical efforts had produced inconsistent results, creating a legacy of skepticism that new analysis couldn't overcome. This scenario plays out repeatedly across industries. At a global retailer, store managers routinely ignored inventory optimization recommendations because the system occasionally suggested stocking seasonal items out of season. Though these edge cases represented less than 2% of recommendations, they undermined confidence in the entire system. Trust breakdowns typically stem from one of three primary sources. First, inconsistent definitions create confusion when different departments calculate the same metric differently. At one financial services firm, 3 separate versions of customer profitability circulated simultaneously, each producing different rankings of their top accounts. Second, quality problems erode confidence when stakeholders encounter obvious errors. An educational technology company lost months of credibility when their student performance dashboard displayed mathematically impossible results during a critical presentation to school administrators. Though quickly fixed, the damage to trust persisted. Third, past experiences with misleading analysis create lingering skepticism. A pharmaceutical company's forecasting team had consistently overestimated sales for new drugs by 30 to 40% for years. When a new analytics leader implemented more accurate models, executives continued applying their own discount factor to projections. A mental adjustment based on previous disappointments rather than current reality. Building trust requires deliberate action across multiple fronts. First, successful data leaders facilitate organization-wide alignment on key metrics. Janet Smith, Chief Data Officer at a healthcare system, implemented definition sessions, bringing together finance, operations, clinical, and IT stakeholders to establish consensus definitions for critical metrics like readmission rates and length of stay. We spent 3 months just getting everyone to agree on how to calculate our top 20 metrics, Smith explained. It was painful but absolutely necessary. We couldn't build trust when different departments were using the same terms to mean different things. Smart data leaders also recognize that absolute precision isn't always necessary. What matters is consistency and transparency about limitations. When Verizon's marketing analytics team couldn't perfectly attribute conversions across channels, they developed confidence intervals for their estimates and clearly communicated the methodological limitations. This honesty about what they knew with certainty versus what required assumptions actually increased stakeholder confidence. Establishing data quality standards and monitoring processes represents another crucial trust-building strategy. Progressive insurance companies have begun implementing data quality scores that appear alongside key metrics in executive dashboards. These scores, updated daily, provide transparency about the reliability of the underlying information. When quality issues arise, they're acknowledged openly rather than hidden. The counterintuitive thing about trust is that admitting problems actually builds credibility, notes William Chen, data quality director at a major bank. When we started flagging potential data quality issues proactively, executives initially worried about what they were seeing. 6 months later, they had more confidence because they knew we weren't hiding problems. Regular visualization of important metrics for leadership also builds familiarity and confidence. The chief analytics officer at a multinational consumer goods company instituted data immersion sessions where executives interact with the same core metrics month after month. This repetition creates pattern recognition. Executives develop intuition about what normal variation looks like versus significant changes requiring attention. Creating feedback loops represents another powerful trust-building mechanism. When stakeholders see their input improving data outputs, their investment and confidence grow. After implementing a simple button allowing managers to flag questionable recommendations from their inventory system, a retail chain saw a 47% increase in compliance with system suggestions. The opportunity to provide feedback made managers feel heard, and the continuous improvement of the system demonstrated responsiveness. Trust building must extend beyond dashboard development to encompass the full analytics lifecycle. At investment management firm BlackRock, data teams conduct assumption transparency sessions before major analyses, walking stakeholders through key assumptions and soliciting input. This involvement early in the process creates shared ownership of the results and increases acceptance of the findings, even when they challenge existing beliefs. Perhaps most importantly, effective data leaders recognize that trust is built through consistent delivery over time. Small wins matter more than big promises. One healthcare analytics leader deliberately began with modest projects where success was highly likely, establishing a track record of reliability before tackling more complex challenges. This incremental approach gradually shifted the burden of proof. Stakeholders began assuming analyses were trustworthy until proven otherwise, rather than requiring extraordinary evidence for every insight. Ring 6. Identifying and mitigating ethical risks. While building trust ensures internal adoption, a far more consequential challenge awaits every data leader. What happens when your sophisticated algorithm inadvertently discriminates against protected groups, or when your analytics platform exposes sensitive customer information? As your data capabilities grow more powerful, so does your responsibility to prevent harm. The 6th ring of data leadership forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality. With great data power comes even greater ethical responsibility. This isn't just about compliance. It's about fundamental organizational sustainability. A 2022 Gartner survey revealed that 85% of companies with advanced AI capabilities experienced at least one significant ethical incident within an 18-month period. More concerning, only 23% had established formal processes for evaluating ethics before implementing new data solutions. This gap between capability and governance creates substantial organizational risk. The ethical dimension of data leadership involves recognizing that just because you can do something with data doesn't mean you should. Consider what happened to a major credit card company that deployed an algorithm that approved higher credit limits for men than women with identical financial profiles. When this became public, the company faced not only a regulatory investigation, but also a consumer boycott that cost them an estimated $31 million in lost revenue. These ethical landmines aren't limited to consumer-facing applications. Internal workforce analytics can create equally damaging scenarios. A technology firm implemented a productivity tracking system that inadvertently penalized employees with caregiving responsibilities who couldn't work during standard hours despite completing all their assignments. The resulting discrimination lawsuit cost them $7.2 million and immeasurable damage to their employer brand. Effective data leaders implement structured approaches to ethical risk assessment. Emily Chang, Chief Ethics Officer at a global financial services firm, developed the clear framework that evaluates data initiatives across 5 dimensions before implementation. We examine consent, whether data subjects understood how their information would be used. Limitations, ensuring data isn't used beyond its intended purpose. Equity, testing for disparate impacts across demographic groups. Accuracy, verifying data quality and representation. And responsibility, determining who's accountable if something goes wrong. This systematic approach prevented what Chang described as a near-miss disaster, when their marketing team proposed using financial transaction data to create targeted advertising profiles. The ethics review revealed this would violate customer expectations about data usage, potentially triggering regulatory penalties and eroding customer trust. Algorithmic bias represents one of the most pernicious ethical challenges. Unlike human bias, which occurs case by case, algorithmic bias scales instantaneously to millions of decisions. A healthcare system discovered their patient risk scoring algorithm was systematically underestimating the care needs of Black patients because it used historical healthcare utilization as a proxy for illness severity without accounting for historical barriers to healthcare access. What made this particularly dangerous, explained Dr. Michael Rodriguez, their Chief Medical Analytics Officer, was that the bias was invisible until we specifically looked for it. The model worked as designed from a technical perspective, but it perpetuated and amplified historical inequities in healthcare delivery. Their solution incorporated an ethics by design approach where new models underwent bias testing across multiple dimensions before deployment. This proactive stance not only prevented potential harm to patients, but also protected the organization from regulatory and reputational damage. Data transparency represents another critical ethical consideration. When organizations make consequential decisions using complex models, they have an ethical obligation to explain how those decisions are made. A municipal government using predictive analytics to prioritize building inspections faced community backlash when residents couldn't understand why certain neighborhoods received more frequent inspections than others. We had to recognize that transparency isn't just about technical documentation, noted Sandra Williams, their Director of Digital Services. It's about making our data processes understandable to the people affected by them. We created simplified explanations of our prioritization criteria and invited community feedback on the factors being considered. Regulatory compliance forms the minimum baseline for ethical data usage, but savvy data leaders recognize that regulations typically lag behind technological capabilities. The European Union's GDPR, California's CCPA, and other privacy regulations establish foundational requirements, but ethical data leadership extends beyond compliance to consider potential harms that may not yet be regulated. By the time something becomes a regulation, it's often because organizations have already crossed ethical lines, observed Rajiv Patel, Chief Data Ethics Officer at a major retailer. True data leaders anticipate where societal expectations are heading and build safeguards before regulations force them to. This forward-looking approach includes establishing data ethics committees that include diverse perspectives beyond technical experts. One pharmaceutical company includes patient advocates, ethicists, and community representatives on their data ethics review board. This broader perspective helped them identify potential issues with a clinical trial recruitment algorithm that technical reviewers had missed. Data leaders must also consider the long-term implications of data collection and storage decisions. Information collected for legitimate purposes today may create ethical dilemmas tomorrow. A fitness technology company collected geolocation data to help users track their running routes, only to receive law enforcement requests for that data in criminal investigations, creating an ethical conflict between user privacy and public safety. We now ask ourselves not just whether we need this data today, but what future scenarios might emerge where having this information creates ethical quandaries. explained their chief privacy officer. Sometimes the most ethical decision is to not collect or retain certain types of data at all. For individual data professionals, ethical leadership means developing the courage to raise concerns when you identify potential harms. This requires organizations to create psychological safety where ethical questions are welcomed rather than perceived as obstacles. The most valuable thing any data professional can do is speak up when they see potential for harm, noted Emma Chen, an AI ethics researcher. But this requires organizations to reward ethical courage rather than punishing those who raise inconvenient questions. Ring 7. Influencing with clarity and purpose. Ethical courage establishes a foundation for data integrity, but the ability to transform insights into organizational action represents a critical distinction among data professionals. The 7th ring confronts a painful reality. Most data presentations fail not because of analytical flaws, but because they prioritize explanation over influence. They become intellectual exercises rather than catalysts for action. This transformation from information sharing to genuine influence requires a fundamental shift in mindset. Stephanie Rodriguez, head of analytics at a global consumer goods company, discovered this distinction early in her career. I spent 3 weeks building the perfect analysis showing our promotion strategy was underperforming. My presentation had beautiful visualizations and rock-solid statistics. The executive team nodded appreciatively, thanked me for the interesting insights, and then completely ignored my recommendations. Rodriguez's experience illustrates a pattern seen across organizations. Technical professionals often believe their job ends at delivering accurate information, leaving implementation to others. This misunderstanding creates what organizational psychologists call the data-to-decision gap, the space between having information and actually using it to change behavior. Closing this gap requires understanding that influence isn't manipulation, it's the art of making insights accessible and actionable. According to Dr. James Harlow, organizational decision researcher at Stanford, the most brilliant analysis in the world is worthless if it doesn't consider how humans actually make decisions. Data professionals need to recognize they're not just in the information business, they're in the behavior change business. This distinction explains why technically identical presentations can yield dramatically different outcomes. Consider the experience of Raj Patel, data science director at a healthcare network. We presented the same predictive model to 2 different hospital leadership teams. With the first group, we focused on the sophisticated algorithm and its impressive accuracy metrics. We received polite interest but no action. With the second group, we opened with patient stories, showed exactly how the model would change specific clinical workflows, and addressed the concerns we knew existed. That hospital implemented our recommendations within a month. Patel's contrasting experiences highlight that effective influence begins with audience centricity, understanding what matters to your stakeholders and framing your message accordingly. Dr. Vanessa Williams, organizational communication researcher, found that data presentations that begin by addressing the audience's primary concerns are 3.4 times more likely to result in action than those that begin with methodology. Consider the variables that influence receptiveness. Decision makers are motivated by different factors. Some prioritize financial outcomes, others operational efficiency or risk reduction. Some prefer comprehensive detail, while others want concise summaries. Effective data leaders recognize these preferences and adapt accordingly. The biggest mistake I see from brilliant technical people is assumption that others share their priorities, notes Marcus Chen, Chief Data Officer at a multinational corporation. They lead with what they find most interesting, the technical challenge, the clever solution, the unexpected pattern, rather than what their audience most cares about, how this affects their objectives, resources, and timeline. The structure of communication matters as much as its content. Dr. Lisa Montgomery, cognitive psychologist specializing in decision science, has conducted research showing that executive audiences typically make judgments within the first 2 minutes of a presentation. If you don't immediately connect your insights to business priorities, you have likely lost your opportunity to influence, she explains. Data leaders develop what communication experts call the translation reflex, automatically converting technical insights into business terminology. Rather than discussing model features, they highlight outcome improvements. Rather than dwelling on methodology, they emphasize implementation requirements. This translation makes insights accessible to stakeholders without technical backgrounds. Beyond structure, effective influence requires developing a compelling narrative that places data in context. Jennifer Washington, data strategy consultant, advocates what she calls the context problem solution action framework to structure high-stakes presentations. First, establish the business context that makes your analysis relevant. Then, clearly state the problem revealed by data. Follow with your solution approach and close with specific action recommendations. This structure connects analytical work directly to decision points. Consider how Rebecca Liu, analytics manager at a manufacturing firm, applied this framework when presenting optimization findings. I didn't start with our analysis methodology or even our findings. I began with the competitive pressure affecting our margins, showed how production inefficiencies were contributing to the problem, then revealed our optimization approach and specific recommendations for each production line. By framing the analysis within their existing concerns, I made the insights immediately relevant. Visual communication plays a crucial role in the influence process. Research by data visualization expert Dr. Thomas Chen demonstrates that decision-makers remember only 10% of statistics they hear, but recall 65% of information presented visually. However, his studies also show that many data professionals create visualizations that showcase technical sophistication rather than clarify key insights. The purpose of data visualization isn't to impress people with your technical skills, explains Chen. It's to make complex information instantly comprehensible. The most effective visualizations aren't necessarily the most sophisticated. They're the ones that make the central insight undeniable. Customization represents another differentiator between informing and influencing. Different stakeholders need different information presented differently. Executive audiences typically need high-level insights with clear business implications. Operational teams require more detailed implementation guidance. Technical peers benefit from methodology transparency. As Michael Rodriguez, data engineering director, observes, I maintain 3 different versions of every important presentation: an executive summary focused on outcomes and resources, an operational deck focused on implementation steps, and a technical appendix for those who need to understand methodology. This approach ensures everyone gets exactly what they need without overwhelming anyone. The ultimate test of influence comes through specificity in action recommendations. Vague suggestions rarely drive change. Effective data leaders provide clear, actionable next steps tailored to the decision context. They anticipate implementation challenges and address them proactively. David Kim, analytics leader at a financial services firm, explains his approach. After presenting findings, I always include slides titled Recommended Next Steps with specific actions, owners, and timelines. Then I address potential objections before they arise with a considerations and mitigations section. This reduces the cognitive load for decision makers and accelerates the path from insight to action. Influence also requires persistence and follow-through. Significant organizational changes rarely occur after a single presentation. Data leaders build influence through consistent communication, periodic check-ins, and demonstrating continued commitment to outcomes. Implementing data leadership in daily practice. The commitment to follow through that characterizes influential data leaders doesn't happen by chance. Behind every consistent data leader is a hidden framework of deliberate routines that transforms abstract principles into concrete actions. Without this structured approach, even the best data insights eventually surrender to the tyranny of the urgent. This structured approach is often called leadership standard work, a concept borrowed from lean manufacturing that has powerful applications in the data leadership space. It refers to the recurring cadence of activities, reviews, and practices that ensure leaders consistently focus on what matters most rather than being perpetually reactive. In the context of data leadership, standard work creates the infrastructure that turns occasional brilliant moments into sustained excellence. Dr. Karen Martinez, Chief Analytics Officer at Brightline Healthcare, explains. Most data professionals I meet know what good looks like. They just struggle with the consistency needed to deliver impact. My team's transformation began when we stopped leaving important leadership activities to chance and started scheduling them with the same rigor we apply to our code reviews. Her experience mirrors what happens in many organizations. Data professionals find their calendars increasingly dominated by technical firefighting, administrative tasks, and ad hoc requests. Without deliberate protection, the higher value leadership activities that truly drive organizational change get squeezed out entirely. This explains why implementing a structured daily, weekly, and monthly cadence has become a defining characteristic of successful data leaders. These routines create a rhythm that ensures consistent attention to critical leadership functions regardless of the chaos of everyday operations. For daily practices, consider how Alejandro Ruiz, data science director at Technova, structures his mornings. My day starts with a 15-minute standing huddle where each team member shares one insight they've uncovered and one stakeholder interaction they plan to have. This keeps us focused on generating insights and maintaining connections outside our technical bubble. Other effective daily practices include reviewing key performance indicators with a specific focus on anomalies, conducting short observational walks to see how data is actually being used in operations, and dedicating 20-30 minutes to relationship-building conversations with business partners. The key with daily practices is their brevity and consistency. They should be short enough to maintain without cancellation even on the busiest days, yet substantive enough to keep leadership principles front and center. Weekly practices require a deeper time investment but provide essential space for reflection and course correction. Melissa Wong, head of analytics at Prime Retail, schedules what she calls impact checkpoints every Wednesday. We review one project in depth, specifically examining whether the data work is actually changing decisions. If not, we pivot immediately rather than waiting for a formal quarterly review. Other effective weekly practices include structured coaching sessions with team members focused on developing their business acumen, cross-functional problem-solving sessions using data, and dedicated time to identify and eliminate barriers to data usage. Many successful data leaders also block thinking time on their calendars. Uninterrupted periods specifically for strategic consideration rather than tactical execution. Monthly and quarterly activities provide the necessary space for deeper review and strategic alignment. David Eckstein, Chief Data Officer at Global Financial, organizes monthly alignment summits where his team reconnects their work to evolving business priorities. We bring in business leaders to share their changing needs and challenges, then collectively reassess our project portfolio against these priorities. This prevents the common trap of continuing projects that no longer align with what the business actually needs. Additional monthly practices might include in-depth performance reviews that explicitly measure impact rather than just activity capability development sessions to build specific leadership skills, and structured forums to evaluate ethical implications of data initiatives. Quarterly business reviews that specifically track how data initiatives have influenced business outcomes. Keep the focus on measurable impact rather than technical achievements. The power of leadership standard work lies in its systematic nature. By designating specific times for these activities and treating them as non-negotiable, data leaders ensure that important leadership functions aren't sacrificed to the constant pressure of urgent technical demands. Implementation requires intentionality and often meets resistance initially. Lisa Wagner, analytics director at Meridian Consulting, recalls, "When I first implemented structured weekly business impact reviews, my team complained about the time commitment. 6 months later, those same team members cited these reviews as the most valuable activity in transforming our relationship with business stakeholders." Dr. Robert Chen, who studies leadership effectiveness at data-driven organizations, recommends starting small. Begin with one daily practice and one weekly practice that directly address your biggest leadership gap. Once those become habits, add additional practices gradually. The goal is sustainability, not an impressive but short-lived transformation. The specific practices that work best vary by organization and leadership role, but the principle remains consistent. Intentionally designing and protecting time for leadership activities that would otherwise be crowded out by technical urgency. Lauren Park, VP of Data Science at Quantum Industries, suggests documenting your leadership standard work. I maintain a simple document listing my daily, weekly, and monthly leadership practices with their purpose and desired outcomes. This clarity helps me evaluate whether I'm spending my time on activities that drive real leadership impact versus just staying busy. The results of implementing leadership standard work can be transformative. Organizations report significant improvements in data team alignment with business priorities, increased adoption of data solutions, and greater recognition of data's value. Perhaps most importantly, data professionals report greater job satisfaction as they see their technical work driving meaningful organizational change rather than disappearing into the void of unused dashboards and reports. The future data leader, skills that will matter most. Beyond the systematic practices that drive current success lies an uncomfortable question few data professionals are prepared to answer. What happens when the technical skills you've spent years perfecting become automated by increasingly sophisticated AI systems? The future belongs to data leaders who master capabilities that machines cannot replicate. We're witnessing a fundamental shift in the data profession. As AI systems become increasingly capable of performing technical tasks that once required human expertise, writing SQL queries, building predictive models, generating visualizations, the skills that will distinguish truly valuable data leaders are changing dramatically. This isn't speculation about some distant future, it's already happening across industries. Consider the rapid evolution of generative AI tools. They can now produce code that would have taken days for a human to write, create complex visualizations from natural language descriptions, and even design basic machine learning models. The pace of automation isn't slowing, it's accelerating. This creates both a threat and an opportunity for data professionals. Those who continue to define their value primarily through technical capabilities face the risk of becoming increasingly replaceable, but those who develop distinctly human leadership capabilities will become more valuable than ever. The most successful data leaders of tomorrow will excel in 4 key areas that AI cannot easily replicate: vision, inspiration, discernment, and courage. These capabilities represent the uniquely human dimension of data leadership that will remain valuable regardless of how advanced AI tools become. First, visionary thinking will separate transformative data leaders from those who merely execute technical tasks. This means developing the ability to see possibilities that others miss, to look beyond immediate technical challenges and envision how data could fundamentally transform an organization. Visionary data leaders don't just solve the problems in front of them, they anticipate future needs and identify opportunities others haven't recognized. This capability requires connecting seemingly unrelated dots across business functions, technologies, and market trends. It means understanding both the technical landscape and the business environment deeply enough to recognize potential intersections that create value. Visionaries can articulate these possibilities in ways that stakeholders can understand and embrace, translating complex technical concepts into compelling future states that inspire action. The second critical capability is the ability to inspire and motivate others. As technical tasks become increasingly automated, the human elements of collaboration, engagement, and community building grow more important. Future data leaders will need to create enthusiasm about data's potential, not just among technical teams, but across entire organizations. This involves building communities of practice where data professionals can share knowledge, develop skills, and collaborate on solving complex problems. It requires emotional intelligence to understand what motivates different stakeholders and how to engage them effectively. Inspirational data leaders create environments where people feel connected to a larger purpose beyond technical execution, where they understand how their work creates meaningful impact. The ability to discern signal from noise will be the third crucial capability. In an environment of ever-increasing data volumes and rapidly evolving technologies, distinguishing meaningful trends from passing hype becomes essential. Future data leaders must develop sophisticated judgment about where to focus limited organizational resources for maximum impact. This discernment requires a deep understanding of both technical possibilities and business realities. It means asking penetrating questions about the why behind proposed initiatives rather than getting caught up in the how. Discerning data leaders maintain a long-term perspective, avoiding the temptation to chase every new technology or technique. They develop frameworks for evaluating opportunities that consider not just technical feasibility, but organizational readiness, strategic alignment, and potential business impact. Finally, Courage will distinguish exceptional data leaders in tomorrow's landscape. As data becomes increasingly central to organizational decision-making, data leaders must be willing to have difficult conversations, make tough prioritization calls, and sometimes take contrarian positions when data contradicts conventional wisdom or executive preferences. This courage manifests in various ways. Speaking truth to power when analyses reveal uncomfortable realities. Making difficult trade-off decisions when resources are limited. Advocating for ethical considerations even when they create short-term challenges. And being willing to deprioritize technically interesting projects that don't drive meaningful business outcomes. Courageous data leaders also admit when they're wrong and pivot quickly when evidence suggests a new direction. These four capabilities, vision, inspiration, discernment, and courage, form an integrated system of leadership that cannot be easily replicated by artificial intelligence. While AI excels at pattern recognition, optimization, and executing well-defined tasks, it lacks the contextual understanding, emotional intelligence, and moral judgment that define truly effective leadership. The implications for data professionals are profound. Career development must expand beyond technical specialization to include these distinctly human capabilities. This doesn't mean technical skills become irrelevant. They remain the foundation upon which leadership capabilities are built. But technical excellence alone will no longer differentiate the most valuable contributors. For organizations, this shift suggests a need to rethink how data teams are structured, evaluated, and developed. Performance metrics should expand beyond technical outputs to include measures of business impact, team effectiveness, and leadership influence. Development programs should intentionally cultivate these human capabilities alongside technical skills. Educational institutions and professional development programs must also evolve. The curriculum for data science and analytics programs should incorporate leadership development, communication skills, ethical reasoning, and business acumen, not as peripheral soft skills, but as core components of professional preparation. The good news is that these capabilities can be developed with intentional practice. Vision improves through exposure to diverse perspectives and disciplines. Inspiration grows through studying effective communicators and practicing storytelling. Discernment sharpens through structured decision frameworks and learning from both successes and failures. Courage strengthens through incremental challenges that push professionals beyond their comfort zones. For individual data professionals, this evolution represents both a challenge and an opportunity. Those who define themselves solely by their technical capabilities may find their value proposition eroding as AI tools advance. But those who develop these distinctly human leadership capabilities will likely find themselves more valuable and influential than ever before. Your data leadership transformation plan. The evolution from technical specialist to influential data leader doesn't happen by accident or seniority. It requires deliberate action starting right where you are. What if the only thing standing between your current role and true data leadership is not a promotion or title change, but rather a strategic shift in how you approach your existing responsibilities? This transformation is accessible to anyone willing to take the initiative, regardless of where you currently sit in your organization. As Tina Rosario, Chief Data Officer at SAP, explains, data leadership is fundamentally about influence, not authority. I've seen junior analysts with tremendous leadership impact because they focused on solving real business problems, not just analyzing data. Many professionals make the critical mistake of waiting for formal authority or the perfect job description before beginning to practice data leadership principles. This passive approach creates a dangerous skills gap. By the time you get that promotion or title change, you haven't developed the capabilities needed to succeed in the role. Instead, start developing these muscles now where you are. Begin with an honest self-assessment against the 7 rings framework. Rate yourself on a scale of 1-5 in each area, but don't stop there. Seek feedback from colleagues, managers, and business partners about how they perceive your capabilities in these dimensions. The gaps between your self-perception and others' views often reveal the most valuable development opportunities. Jessica Tan, analytics director at a healthcare system, recommends creating a personal skills radar chart. Visualizing my development areas changed everything. I could clearly see I needed to prioritize business impact measurement and influencing skills over technical development. Select one specific business challenge where improved data usage could make a meaningful difference. The key is choosing something meaningful enough to demonstrate value, but small enough to be achievable without formal authority. When Michael Chang, now a data science director, was still an individual contributor, he identified inventory forecasting as his focus area. I didn't ask permission, I just started interviewing store managers about their pain points with the current system. Those conversations gave me insights no one else had, and within 3 months, I was invited to lead a cross-functional team addressing the problem. Finding mentors who demonstrate strong data leadership provides crucial guidance during your transformation. Look beyond the obvious candidates in your direct reporting line. Some of the best mentors might be in completely different functions or even different organizations. Dr. Elaine Chen, principal data scientist at a pharmaceutical company, established a personal board of directors with 5 diverse mentors. Each person brings a different perspective. One helps me navigate organizational politics, another strengthens my technical decision-making, and a third challenges my thinking about ethical implications. Deliberately building your business acumen accelerates data leadership development. Volunteer for cross-functional projects that expose you to different aspects of the organization. Attend strategic planning sessions whenever possible, even as an observer. Read your company's annual reports, investor presentations, and industry analyses. Daniel Reed, who progressed from data analyst to chief analytics officer in 6 years, made a practice of having lunch with someone from a different department each week. Those informal conversations taught me more about our business challenges than any formal training ever could. Practice the crucial skill of translation, converting technical concepts into business language and transforming business problems into data requirements. This bidirectional translation capability distinguishes true data leaders from technical specialists. Natalie Wong, analytics manager at a financial services firm, developed this skill by shadowing customer service representatives. After hearing customers describe their problems firsthand, I completely changed how I communicated with executives. I stopped talking about model accuracy and started discussing how our work would improve the customer experience. Small wins build momentum and credibility. Document each success, however modest, with clear metrics showing the business impact. These documented wins become powerful evidence when seeking broader responsibilities. Kevin Zhang, data science team lead at a software company, created a simple 1-page impact report for each project. These reports became my calling card. I could show exactly how my work had influenced revenue, customer satisfaction, and operational efficiency. Building data leadership capabilities also requires expanding your professional network beyond your immediate team. Participate in industry conferences, join professional communities, and engage in knowledge sharing. These connections provide valuable perspective and create opportunities for collaborative problem solving. Sonia Rodriguez, analytics director, credits her rapid career advancement to her external network. When I faced a seemingly impossible data governance challenge, I reached out to my professional community and received invaluable advice from someone who had solved a similar problem in a completely different industry. Crucially, position yourself as a problem solver rather than a technical specialist. When colleagues or leaders mention business challenges, respond with, "Let me see how data might help with that," rather than waiting for formal requests. This proactive approach establishes you as a business partner rather than a technical resource. As Rachel Kim, now a chief data officer, explains, "I never waited for someone to ask the right question. I listened for the underlying problems and proposed data-driven solutions, even when no one expected them." Remember that developing data leadership capabilities is an iterative process. You'll make mistakes along the way, approaches that don't resonate, analyses that miss the mark, influence attempts that fall flat. Use these moments as learning opportunities rather than evidence you should retreat to technical work. Each failure provides valuable feedback that strengthens your leadership muscles. Throughout our journey, exploring the 7 rings of data leadership, we've uncovered a fundamental truth: the distinction between data and evidence. Data exists as raw information. Evidence transforms that information into contextual insights directed at solving meaningful problems. Your evolution from report creator to business catalyst begins with a mindset shift, choosing to lead with data rather than merely manage it. This means connecting technical capabilities to organizational challenges, proving impact in business terms, and influencing decisions that drive tangible outcomes. The 7 Rings framework isn't just a professional development tool, it's your roadmap to career transformation. By implementing these principles, you'll position yourself as an indispensable force in your organization's data-driven future. The time for action is now.